Zika found in saliva and urine, warns the propagandists at the BRICS Post. U.S. athletes should consider skipping Rio if they fear Zika, chides Rothschild's Reuters. Zika prompts urgent debate about abortion in Latin America, rejoices the Washington Post. And the Australian Broadcasting Corporation tells us, Zika virus, Brazilian survey calls into question cause of microcephaly? Oh, yes, exactly as we were talking about on the program last week with John Rappaport. Yes, it turns out that the Zika microcephaly connection has been vastly overblown, in fact created out of whole cloth. Why, I never. Thank you to the observant listener who sent this link in via email on the Corbett Report contact form. And yes, this relates to Dr. Sandra Matos, a pediatric cardiologist in Brazil who has a handy-dandy database coming from the 100,000 newborns that she's treated over the last few years for congenital heart disease in the Brazilian state of Paraíba. And wow, wouldn't you know it, she has all of this data, length, weight, and head circumference of these newborns, which you might recognize as the indicator, not the inditer, the indicator for microcephaly. And with that knowledge, what did she find? They were expecting to find 3 to 4 cases a year of microcephaly, but what they actually found was that between 2 to 8% of the babies in this database would fall into the criteria of microcephaly. That translates into 2,000 to 4,000 babies per year in this one state alone, i.e. 1,000 times more than they were expecting. Now, this goes back to 2012, so it has nothing whatsoever to do with the Zika outbreak from last fall that they're trying to pin the blame of this supposed recent surge of microcephaly on, although, again, as we talked about last week, out of the 4,700-odd reported cases, only 400 have been confirmed so far, and only 17 have been quote-unquote associated with Zika virus. So there's a whole lot of smoke going on with a whole little fire. And yes, again, there's absolutely no connection that has been made between Zika virus and microcephaly, and in fact, there's growing evidence that there is no connection. And for more elaboration on this, I will once again direct you to John Rappaport's blog. You might have seen his latest post, Who Launched the Fake Epidemic story in Brazil, talking about the World Health Organization. He does a good job of breaking down their actual press release on their emergency committee meeting that they held late last month, and he goes through it and deciphers the wording, the associated with. Zika has been associated with a steep increase in the birth of babies with abnormally small heads, although an actual connection has not been established, but close enough. And they go on, of course, to laud themselves and their various offices around Latin America and around the world for keeping such great control over the situation and blah, blah, blah. So, yes, the WHO only has the hammer of being able to declare a pandemic, and lo and behold, every time that there's any chance for them to do so, whether it's swine flu or Ebola or now Zika, they will do so, and they will come down with their hammer on mosquitoes. So we've seen, of course, the Brazilian army going to house in their valiant fight against these mosquitoes. And the WHO, of course, declaring its public health emergency of international concern, which activates all of the medical martial law apparatus, which they can or don't have to use in any given event, and which could go all the way up to escalation, all the way into the realm of NATO boots on the ground in whatever country they deem fit. I don't think that's going to happen this time, but it is part of what they can actually do with the PHEIC, as we documented last year in our open source investigation on Ebola. And now the next shoe is dropping. We have the CDC now activating their highest emergency operations level. That's level 1 emergency in the wake of this spread of Zika virus. It might be reaching the United States. Oh no, and you might come down with some sniffles and maybe a rash for 2 to 7 days, and it will go away naturally because there's no way to treat it, because it's like the common cold. But there you go. I mean, this is what people are freaking out about because the media is telling them to. And so, of course, as a logical extension, Obama is now asking Congress for emergency funding to combat Zika. How much funding? $1.8 billion. And what are they going to do with that? They're going to expand mosquito control programs. They're going to develop diagnostic tests, improve support for low-income pregnant women. That doesn't seem like $1.8 billion. Oh, they're going to speed develop a vaccine. Ping pong, ching ching, there it is. All that money going injected right into the arm of Big Pharma. Surprise, surprise. So, yes, this is playing out exactly as predicted. Absolutely no surprise there. And so people, I hope no one in my audience is freaking out about this, but if you do know anyone who is freaking out, perhaps you can direct them to some of these resources, which of course I will link up in the show notes for today's episode. Thank you to the observant listener who sent this article in from the ABC, and another listener who sent in a good take on this $1.8 billion of funding that they're throwing at this right now. Compare that to the $3 million that the 9/11 Commission was initially funded with, i.e. 1/500th the amount of money that they're now throwing at this non-existent pandemic that's not going to kill anybody. They're throwing 500 times more money around than they did at the 9/11 Commission. But don't worry, of course, they did ultimately give another $9 million to the 9/11 Commission. So it ended up with $12 million. Wow. To investigate, the biggest attack in U.S. soil, blah, blah, blah. Of course, we know why that is. We know that the people who were complicit in those attacks don't want to fund the investigation into them. But this is just a good way of snapping people back to reality, that you're spending $1.8 billion on a virus that has been connected to nothing and shown to kill no one. And, and it's, of course, all going to go straight to Big Pharma so that they can develop their vaccines at taxpayer expense and then sell them to the government at their own profit. Corporate crony capitalism, fascism, whatever you want to call it, at work. And again, nothing surprising, but once again, please don't freak out about this. And don't freak out about the fact that I'm covering this again. I am not planning to make this into the All Zika All the Time channel. In fact, I don't plan on covering Zika again unless there is some dramatic dynamic change in the situation. But I just wanted to follow up with what we were talking about last week and show what is going on. On that note, I think that's going to do it for today. I'm James Corbett, CorbettReport.com.